Good morning, everyone. Iain mentioned that I'll be talking about Brescia aculeata. I do normally speak about Brescia aculeata, but in this case I'm actually not talking about Brescia aculeata. But there is very good news for that weed, because we got permission to release a very damaging biocontrol agent just last week, so there's hope in the horizon. And the talk that's following this talk is going to be by Lumka, who's looking at another biocontrol agent which we're working on in program. So there's hope in the horizon for one of the ugly ones, one of the bad ones. Sorry. In April this year, the South African biological control community celebrated 100 years of biological control by hosting the 14th annual Weed Symposium, International Biological Control and Weed Symposium. And because of this landmark of 100 years of biological control in South Africa, there have been a lot of talks that have been given recently about the history of biological control in the country at various different conferences. And I don't want to repeat what people have already said in the past, so today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about it in a bit of a different way. I'm going to look at where we are in biological control in South Africa, and then I'm going to look at some of the things that we've done right and some of the places that we can possibly improve. And my co-authors on this talk are Professor Martin Hill from Rhodes University and Costas Zachariades from the ARC PPRI, and he's also affiliated with UKZN. But I think that I've drawn on the whole biocontrol community to put this talk together. So just to give you a bit of contents of what I'm going to speak about, I'm going to look a bit about where we are in biological control, and then I'm going to look at how we got there. And these are some of the things that we've been doing right. I'm divided it up into 4 different sections. I'm going to look at how we choose weeds and how we choose agents. And then I'm going to look at how we ensure safety, and I'm going to look at how we implement the research that we've done. And then I'm going to look at how we evaluate these biological control programs. And with each one I'm going to talk about what we're getting right and possibly how we can improve. And I've got a photo of a Puntia monacantha up there because that's always a really good way to start to talk on biological control, because it was the first plant which we introduced a biological control agent against in South Africa, and obviously that was just over 100 years ago. This plant was a major problem in my part of the world, in the Eastern Cape, and just over 100 years ago we released a cochineal insect on it, and it's been completely controlled. So biological control got off to a really good start in South Africa. So to look at where we are, one really good place to find out where we are in biological control is to be at the International Symposium on Biological Control, because we can compare our science and where we are as a community with all of the other biocontrol practitioners in the world. And as I said, in April we had this fantastic conference, and I really must thank all of the organizers, especially Fiona, for putting together a really fantastic conference. There were 156 delegates at the conference from 24 different countries. But one thing that was really noticeable was that some of the traditionally strong biological control countries were not at this conference. They were underrepresented. There were people there, but there were very few. Australia used to be at the forefront of biological control. Lots of the work that they have done really has helped South African researchers, and they had a lot of capacity and a lot of momentum. Bill Palmer, who's a senior researcher, who's just reaching retirement age now, a senior researcher in Australia, gave what was a very sad talk about where biological control in Australia is going. There's been a change in government, they've lost a lot of funding, and they've lost a lot of capacity. The posts in biological control are no longer being filled. And so it's a very sad story about what's happening in Australia at the moment. There's a slightly different story in the USA. There were very few delegates from the USA, which is also traditionally a very strong weed biological control country. And the reason for it is slightly different. In the USA, there's very restrictive legislation about how to release biological control agents, and it's made it impossible for biocontrol researchers to actually do their jobs. And I think this is something that we really need to avoid in South Africa. So the authorities are asking for almost impossible studies to be done in order to introduce biological control agents. New Zealand, on the positive side, New Zealand is doing exceptionally well and have a lot of capacity, and there's been a huge amount of growth in biological control in Europe. And this is to do with new regulation about how they have to treat weeds within the European Union. And in South Africa, it was very clear from the conference that we were doing very well. Obviously, there were lots of delegates there because it was held in South Africa. But just from the feel of the conference, from the talks that the South African scientists gave, and from talking to all the other biocontrol people from all over the world, it was very clear that South Africa is in a very good place. Another good way of looking at where we are in biological control is to look at the biological control reviews. There have been 3 sets of reviews that have come out. The most recent one was in 2011. And in these reviews, which the most recent one was a special edition in African Entomology, in these reviews we summarise in quite a lot of detail all of the work that has been done on biocontrol programs. And one of the very important papers in this was a paper by Hildegard Klein, which summarised all the different agents that we have worked on. And in this paper, Hildegard found that we had considered 270 biological control agents for control in South Africa, those ones that had just been considered. And of those, 106 of them have been released. And what I'm going to talk about a bit in this talk is about how we chose those 106 agents. Of those 106 agents that have been released, 80 have established on 48 different weeds. Now that means that there's 26 agents that haven't established in South Africa. And there's 2 reasons why that could be. Maybe we didn't choose those agents correctly, or maybe we haven't implemented it correctly. And I'm also going to be talking a little bit about implementation. And then, because it's very important, it's in bold, 64 agents have been rejected. And that speaks to the safety of biological control. And in South Africa, we have an impeccable safety record in biological control. And the 64 is actually a very high number. It's higher than it looks, because those 270 biocontrol agents that were brought back into the country had already undergone some form of prioritization. We don't just go and collect any old insect or mite or pathogen and bring it back. We're choosing winners. So those were 64 agents that we thought were winners that we rejected. So it's actually a very high rejection rate. So how well have we done? In 59% of these weed control programs, we've had some level of control from biological control. And in 21% of them, we have complete control. And by complete control, I mean that no other mechanisms, no herbicides or mechanical removals are required in order to keep these weeds at a suitably low level. So we do evaluate how well we're doing in biocontrol, but we could possibly be doing it better, and that's how I'll end off my talk. So how do we choose the biocontrol agents that we work on, and how do we choose the weeds that we work on? Well, one way is to look for weeds that have been successfully controlled elsewhere. These are weeds that we have the greatest chance of success with, and they are therefore very good value for money projects. And I've got a photo of Zachariades over there. This is just one of the really good examples where in New Zealand they've developed really good biological control agents for the control of Zachariades, and they know their work. So without putting in too many resources, the South Africans can get the benefits of biological control without having to put huge amounts of time and money into the project. And possibly another one would be the Robinia project that Ron Martin talked about yesterday, where there's really been a lot of work done, and we know that we have successful winners. And in many of the cactus biocontrol programs, not all of them, but in many of them, and in many of the water weeds programs, this is how we've had so much success. We've piggybacked on work from other countries. We also try and work on plants where there's no other solution, and this is where chemical control and mechanical control is just not a solution at all. They don't work. And vines here are very important. This is a Pereskia infestation just south of where we are now. And you can see that it's intertwined with the native vegetation. It's covering a whole lot of trees. It's a devastating weed. But as Iain mentioned in the previous talk, controlling it mechanically and with herbicides is almost impossible, and just takes so many resources, and the only thing that's going to come back afterwards is going to be Pereskia. Another thing about it is that it grows on really, really steep slopes. So sending a working for water team up there is not wise. We also need to work on the weeds that are the biggest problems in the country. We need to work on weeds where it's in the public's interest to control them. And also on weeds that are really noticeable. And there's a photo there of a billboard talking about triffid weed. So this is a weed that the public knows about. Pom-pom weed was another one. It's a really noticeable weed and a really damaging weed. Often these are really difficult biocontrol programs, and in many cases they require an integrated approach. But if we do manage to get control over these weeds, this is where we're going to get the greatest benefit to the public. So we really need to tackle these projects, even though they're often very difficult. So how do we go about choosing which weeds to work on? Often the legislation tells us which we need to work on. We look at the CAR Act or the Member Act, and we need to work on the Category 1 weeds. But we also look at the most damaging, the most abundant of these weeds, and we also need to choose a few that we have a really good chance of success. So there's a balance between working on the most difficult and most damaging weeds, but also choosing successes, and it's important to find that balance. And I think that in South Africa we've done that quite well. And the reason why we've done that quite well is because it's the experts who prioritize which weeds we work on. It's at weeds workshops, at meetings like this, that we all talk about which plants are going to be the best candidates for biological control. And the Biocontrol Research Advisory Panel has also played a big role in deciding which weeds we should work on. And international collaboration has also been really important. At ISPCW, we had an opportunity to speak to a whole lot of international people and see where they're having successes and see where we can piggyback on their work. And I must also just mention flexibility of funding at this point. We've been funded since 1996. The Biocontrol research community has been funded by Working for Water. And we've developed a relationship with Working for Water, and we've developed a relationship of trust. And it means that during these 3-year rolling budgets, if we find that we're at a dead end, we're able to change. If we're working on one weed and we find that we're at a dead end, we're able to change where we put our resources. Working for Water has allowed us to do that, and I think that's been very important, so that we can give the best value for money that we possibly can. Moving on to the next topic, it's how we keep our safety record so good. And we have an excellent safety record, and as I said, that's because of those 64 agents that we've rejected. And the first step, again, is internal stewardship. It's the biological control community who looks at whether these insects are safe or not. But also, we send all of our work out to international peer review. And that's in the form of publications, but it's also the release reports are also sent out to international peer review. And Philip Ivey has recently put together a committee that deals with these release applications that is really working. So we're managing to get a whole lot of insects out at the moment. So it's important that these release applications go out to international peer review. Also, once a year, our reports that go to Working for Water are sent out to international peer review. Again, we have a very understanding funder, and this long relationship that we've had with Working for Water means that Working for Water actually understands biological control. And this is very important because it's quite difficult to get someone to give you a whole lot of money to work on an insect that you might not release. So it's very important that Working for Water understands biocontrol and is doing that. And the next step was implementation. And implementation, what are the goals of implementation? It's to release as many healthy insects as possible at as many sites as possible. And there's two ways that we do this. We look at field redistribution, and then there's also mass rearing. I haven't worked on any insects or programs that involve field redistribution, but it's a very important component of biological control. But what I want to really focus on is mass rearing. The way to improve implementation in South Africa, it is working, but I think that there's a huge amount of scope for growth. And I think we just need to increase capacity. There's not enough mass rearing facilities in South Africa, and because there's not enough mass rearing facilities, there's not enough insects being released. And we're not using the biocontrol agents that we have to our full potential in this country. SASRI has released most of the agents by a long shot over the last few years. And those are 3 photos of SASRI's mass rearing facility. And I put them up there because it's actually quite simple stuff. It's not very difficult, it's not very expensive to set up a mass rearing facility. So I think that we need to increase our capacity in mass rearing. And how do we do this? I think it's important that we link the mass rearing facilities to the research facilities so that the researchers and the implementers are close together and can work together. I think we should also specialize these mass rearing facilities. Mass rearing facilities should work on reasonably groups of weeds. So we should have one that does cactus weeds, one that does water weeds, and one for subtropical weeds, some such thing. I also think that we should be approaching commercial mass rearing facilities. SASRI has done the best at mass rearing in South Africa, And the reason for that is that they are a commercial mass rearing facility. Just to give you a bit of background to that, most of the mass rearing facilities, the commercial mass rearing facilities, are producing parasitoids for pests on crops. They produce huge numbers of insects, and they really have the expertise to produce huge numbers of insects. And I think that if we approach some mass rearing facilities, commercial mass rearing facilities, we could really increase the number of insects that we get out into the field. This is also an excellent place for job creation and an excellent place to increase person days in biological control. This photo is of the Disabled Persons Program at Rhodes University. There's 4 guys there. They're disabled people that didn't have a job. They now have a job. They've been empowered. They're the breadwinners for their family, and they're releasing lots of biocontrol agents that are doing a load of good in the country. And there's 4 people in that photograph, but there could be 50. We could really, really increase our capacity by improving on that. Moving on to measures of success, we do a whole lot of post-release evaluations in South Africa. I've just got 2 examples up there. One is the Pantia Stricta post-release monitoring program in Kruger Park, and John Hoffman and Cliff Moran have been working on that since 1993, and they've got permanent transects, and they've collected fantastic data, and they've got really good data showing that the Pantia Stricta infestation has decreased dramatically over time. There's also a water weeds post-release monitoring program, which is a countrywide program, where we travel all over the country and we check at every water body that we can, looking at where the weed is, how much of the agent is there, and damage to the weed. So we do have lots of post-release monitoring programs, but they've been somewhat neglected. And I think that the big thing that we're not doing is we're not measuring the direct benefits of biological control. And by that I mean not measuring the direct benefits of individual biological control agents. Normally what we do is we go out there, we look at the plant, we see how much of the plant there is there, mostly we see how much of the insect there is there. But at most we're watching a decrease in the plant. I think what we need to be doing is looking for the real benefits, for the reason why we want to get rid of that weed in the first place. And often that's how much water have we saved from releasing this biocontrol agent, what are the economic benefits of releasing the control agent, and maybe what are the benefits to biodiversity. And this is a paper by Brian van Vulken, in which he's looked at the economic benefits of biocontrol. And there are quite a few papers like this, so there are exceptions. But I think that increasing this sort of work is going to be very important for us. So how do we improve this? It's really difficult to find out what the direct benefits of biological control are. It's difficult to find out how much water your little insect that you released has saved. But I think we should take on the challenge. But we're going to need help, and we're going to need help from other disciplines. We've got to get hydrologists, ecologists, economists, sociologists, and many other people involved to help us. I also think that we can increase the scale of post-release monitoring. And I just want to point out a big difference here. We've got post-release evaluations, which are very complicated things where we need these experts, these hydrologists and ecologists, etc. But then there's also a lot of merit in finding out what's happening on a countrywide scale with basic presence or absence, or measuring much more basic parameters. And I think these post-release evaluations could be greatly expanded if we start using landowners and other private organizations to do these post-release evaluations for us. And in the implementation meeting that was held before this meeting, which was held by Debbie Sharp, she talked a lot about how we're going to do this. We're going to have teams working for the team actually doing our post-release monitoring for us. And I think that's a spectacular idea. And it's a very important way that we can create jobs again in biological control. So there's a lot of people who could benefit from this, and it would produce great data for researchers. So just looking a bit towards the future, overall biological control in South Africa is in an excellent position, and we've got a great opportunity. We really have a good opportunity to tackle some of the worst weeds in the country, some of the worst weeds that Iain McDonald was talking about. And we should take on the challenge, because we can. And there are challenging projects, they are very difficult, and they're big projects. They're going to be multidisciplinary projects. I've got a photo of Prosopis up there. That's a Prosopis infestation, and it's one of the really, really bad weeds, and a difficult one. And Parthenium is another one, which we are working on. Really bad weeds, but we can't shy away from them because they're difficult. So as I said, we need a multidisciplinary approach, but I think it's really important that we do detailed pre- and post-release studies so that we know about the benefits that we've done, because we really, really need to understand all of the benefits of biological control. Just in summary, it's obvious that biological control has massive benefits to nature, agriculture, and water resources. It's also been shown time and again, and lots of work that was done by Brian van Wilken, on that it's an economically good and sound investment. It's a ridiculously good investment, actually. It's also safe, and we have an impeccable safety record in the country. We've had sustained funding since 1996, and that sustained funding has helped us do all of this work, and it's helped us get to where we are. But it also shows that we've been doing a good job, because we've managed to maintain this funding. And overall, Biocontrol is thriving in the country. And I just want to end with a bit of a personal thing. This is one of the earliest biological control of weeds conferences, weeds workshops. But Iain, were you at that one? No. Okay. Okay, that was in 1983, Hildegard says. That's the year that I was born. So you can see it's a small group of people, and it's the decisions that were made at this conference, at this small workshop, that have led to the successes that we have in biological control in South Africa today. And what's really important is that these people communicated with each other, they talked to each other, and they all had one goal in mind. And they were a community. This was one of the first weeds workshops that I went to. I'm sure lots of people will recognize themselves in it. It's a much bigger group. And this meeting has evolved into what we're at today. I mean, there's 191 people here today. It's a huge group, which is fantastic. And we've got to embrace that growth, because now we've got a whole lot more capacity. But it also comes with responsibilities. It's really important that we all keep the same goal in mind, just like people did in the past. It's important that we communicate, and it's important that we remain a community if we want to have success in the future. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.